of our webinar today. And as John said, I'm Head of Mental Health Engagement and Recovery with the HSE. And the function of the Office of Mental Health Engagement and Recovery is to lead out on that partnership approach with service users, family members and carers, and indeed all other stakeholders in working together to ensure that our mental health services are more recovery orientated. And we work in a co-production approach to achieve this. And we have a few areas of work that we focus on. The main areas of our work are on promoting recovery practice and recovery education. And recovery education is one of the key drivers of a recovery orientated service. And in our services now, each area has a recovery education service, and many of them have recovery colleges. And recovery education is open to everyone, and it offers people opportunities to learn more about mental health, to learn more about mental health services, and to learn more about recovery and what their role in it is. And if you'd like to learn any more about recovery education, you can go on to the HSE Mental Health Engagement and Recovery page on the HSE website. The second strand of our work is around engagement, engaging with service users and family members on their experience of using our service. And to help us do that, we have in each area, we have an area lead for mental health engagement, and they coordinate structures to help us carry out the engagement, primarily in mental health engagement forums, where any service user or family member can attend and share their experience of using our services. And that feedback is very important to us because it helps us to ensure that our services are more recovery focused. And the third area of the work of the Office of Mental Health Engagement and Recovery is around the Service Reform Fund. And this is a program which helps us to ensure that the organizational and culture change required to make our services more recovery focused is happening. So it tries to embed practices and structures that allows that to happen. And its main areas of work would be around the IPS program, housing, and developing recovery innovation. So I've talked a lot about recovery, as I showed us. It's I suppose the key objective of our services is to help people to recover from their mental health challenges and lead full and better lives. So it might be just helpful to remind us what exactly we mean by recovery. And to do that, we're going to have a short video clip in a moment that will take us through that. After that, then I will be handing over to my colleague Sinead Reynolds, who is a Senior Operations and Performance Manager with the HSE Mental Health National Operations team. And she will be just talking about the benefits of partnership with service users, family members and carers. So I hope you all have a very enjoyable time on the webinar. And now let's hear about recovery.
In Ireland, the Health Service Executive Mental Health Services vision is that recovery is a reality for all. So what does that In Ireland, the Health Service Executive Mental Health Services vision is that recovery is a reality for all. So what does that actually mean? Well, anyone can experience mental health challenges. The good thing is people can and do recover. So how does a serious mental health challenge affect a person? Well, it may impact on their ability to carry out normal everyday tasks. It may be difficult to form or maintain relationships, find or hold down a job, make friends, and be part of the community. It can be a very lonely place, as they may have experiences that others just don't understand. So what is mental health recovery? First of all, it's personal. Recovery is as unique as you are. It's about living a good life with or without symptoms. It's about what you can do, not what you can't. It can be a journey for some and a destination for others. And it's not always easy, but with the right supports, recovery is real. Evidence suggests that recovery is best supported by 5 things. Just remember the word CHIME. C stands for connections, having good relationships with other people. H is for hope and the belief that you can recover. I is for identity, having a positive sense of yourself. M represents finding your own meaning and purpose in life. Finally, E is for empowerment, focusing on your strengths and having control over your life. That's CHIME.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay now? Great. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed that video. Sorry for the slight delay. Michael has spoken about the work that we do on the mental health engagement and recovery team, and I'm just going to speak a little bit about how we work in a recovery-focused way. So we work in this way to ensure there is a greater involvement of those with lived experience of mental health challenges and those who support and care for them in mental health service provision. In 2018, the National Framework for Recovery in Mental Health was developed, as many of you will know, through co-production. The framework supports services to continue to embed recovery within mental health. The framework has 4 principles: the centrality of the service user, co-production between all stakeholders, organisational commitment for recovery, and supporting recovery education and recovery practice. A further set of actions was also developed to support family recovery. On the national team, one of our strategic aims is to lead and support the development of mental health services which are responsive to people's needs. So how do we do this? So it's so important to incorporate lived and family experience into service improvement. This is done through our local and area forums, which are established by the mental health engagement leads, and we'll hear more about that during the panel discussion. Individuals and families are empowered to become leaders in their own recovery. Training opportunities are provided, such as recovery principles and practice, forum training, and QQI training. Partnerships are promoted between all stakeholders for better recovery outcomes, and examples include national groups, which include family advisory groups, trauma-informed care groups, and universal access for recovery education groups. We continue to ensure recovery education is accessible for all, and a great example of this is the employment of recovery education facilitators across the country this year. We identify and promote best practice and innovation in recovery and engagement, and we are currently developing measurement tools for recovery education. Locally, there are a huge number of actions taking place which support the 4 principles of the framework, and it would be hard to do them all justice, but I'll just give you some practical example of what is happening locally. So RAP workshops are being co-facilitated and co-received, and people are also having the opportunity to become RAP facilitators. Peer support workers are employed on local mental health teams, and we'll hear more about this during the panel discussion, as Martha is a peer support worker. Recovery education courses and workshops are available across the country. These include co-production workshops and also linking to other community partners and organisations. The HSE is committed to recovery locally, and this is seen with recovery principles and practice workshops being attended by all staff, and mental health forums having representation on service groups such as steering groups and working groups. Family therapy and support groups are available in certain areas, and peer support workers who support families are now being employed. So as you can see, there is a wide range of activities going on which support the work of the framework, and we hope this continues throughout the next year and into the next lifetime of the framework. So I'll now hand you over to Sinead Reynolds. Sinead is the General Manager for National Operations and Performance in Mental Health and Community Operations. Thank you.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Hi, Sinead.
Okay, I think you can see me now, can you? Okay, so can see and hear. Great. That's great. Brilliant, thank you. Lots of responses. Okay, so my name is Sinead Reynolds, and I work with the Mental Health Operations National Management Team, and I'm here today representing Jim Ryan, who is the Assistant National Director and Head of Mental Health Operations, and he would be here himself, except that an unforeseen meeting came up that he couldn't get out of, so he asked that I would represent him this morning, and I was very happy to do so because this theme is something that's close to my heart, so it's nice to be asked to come and talk at an event that you feel is really important and should be happening. So thanks for asking me, and it's lovely to be here. I suppose the important thing to say is that both engagement and recovery and the importance of lived experience are topics that are very close to my heart and always have been. And I thought just to say something a little bit different this morning, I thought I'd speak a little bit about my own journey in mental health services. So I started my career as a speech and language therapist in CAMHS many years ago. And I suppose working as a speech and language therapist, with people who are experiencing mental health difficulties and their families was, I suppose, a really good start in terms of my passion and how I feel about engagement, because I was working with people whose voices weren't heard and who had communication difficulties. So people who struggled maybe at times to understand what the mental health team around them were saying, and certainly people who struggled to have their voices heard. So from very early in my career, the voice of the service user was a very strong part of what I did every day. And I also worked very hard with family members, because in child and adolescent services, it's really important that we involve family members. And I suppose many years ago, we would have seen perhaps younger children than are seen now. So family members were very much part of what I did. And after that, I moved on to work in detention settings. And as everybody knows, when you're working in detention and when you're working with deprivation of liberty, things like the rights of service users and the voice of service users and family members are really important. And in those detention settings, we would have had quite a lot of oversight from the courts and from people like guardian ad litem, and lots of structures in place to ensure that the rights of service users were upheld and that their voices were heard. But yet what I found working in those settings is that sadly often there were times when the voice of service users weren't heard, despite all of those supports that were put in place. And wondering about that, I suppose the conclusion I came to was that often that's about the dynamics of power. And when people are at their lowest ebb and when deprivation of liberty is part of what we're dealing with, then there always will be dynamics of power. And that's why it's really important that we work hard on things like engagement and recovery and ensuring that the voice of service users and their family members are heard, because there are dynamics of power in health services, and we need to be very aware of those. I came back to mental health in 2017, and at that time engagement had really taken off. So I had been gone from mental health for a few years, and I suppose I was really pleased and excited to see what had happened in terms of engagement and recovery when I was gone. So recovery would have been talked about before I left, but when I came back there were all sorts of exciting things happening. So we had a head of engagement on the national senior management team. That was Liam Hennessy at the time, and that he has been replaced by Michael Ryan very ably since then. So we have a head of engagement at the senior table involved in all of the decisions that are being made around resources, etc. And that was really, really exciting, and I think progressive in terms of the international situation, because we are ahead of the game in that respect. And there were also engagement leads in each of the CHOs, and people who were committed to looking at engagement and recovery on a daily basis as part of our mental health teams and our management teams. We also had peer support workers, and I suppose working with people in, particularly for me, in the SRUs, hearing from people in the specialist rehabilitation units, I've been hearing about how important that peer support working is, and how it's really important for service users to have people working with them who have lived experience, because it's different from working with professionals. So that was really exciting. Also, the recovery colleges were up and running, and I know we've more work to do, but they were up and running and working very successfully in certain areas. And we also had engagement fora, which we certainly hadn't had when I had left mental health. And again, there is more work to do there in terms of making sure we hear all the voices, but the fact that the engagement fora are up and running is really exciting. And we had service user involvement in service improvement projects, and I am a sponsor on a number of service improvement projects, and so had the pleasure of having a service user representative at the steering committee and working groups of many service improvement projects within mental health. And it was really, I suppose, important to have a service user as part of that. So all of those progressions that had happened when I was gone were all really exciting. And I suppose it's important that they're happening, but it's also important that we don't think we're finished, because while we've done lots of really good stuff, there's certainly more to do. in terms of engagement and recovery. So I suppose my opinion is that the involvement of service users and also family members helps to keep us focused on the right things in mental health. And I certainly have been at tables where the fact that we had a service user in the room kept people focused on the right things and made sure that we stayed on the right track. I think it's important as well that we involve service users in our analysis of services, and that we make sure that we have structures that allow us to ask service users what the services are like for them, because that's the really important question. That's why services exist in the first place. So we need to be asking service users, what's it like for you, in order to keep us on track. And that's kind of a quality check. So we need to be clinically excellent in our services, but we also need to ensure that our services are meeting the needs of the people who they serve. So it's a really good reality check for us. And also, I suppose, the involvement of service users in everything we do is therapeutic in itself. It's empowering for service users, and it's part of how we do recovery. So with all of that in mind, I think it's very fitting that today we are celebrating this as part of World Mental Health Week. And as I said, it's really, it's a great privilege to be part of this. So thank you for asking me. Thanks. I'll hand you back to Aisling. I'm not sure who we're going back to now, so I'll just come off the video and I'll let you take it from there.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sinead, for that very empowering speech, and hearing about how lived experience really helps us, or really helps the service move towards a more recovery-oriented service. Good morning, everyone, and I suppose just to introduce myself, my name is Michael Norton. I am one of the National Engagement and Recovery Leads with the Office of Mental Health Engagement and Recovery. And I'm here today to facilitate a panel discussion in regards to lived experience and how lived experience shapes the role of various roles that are going on across the country. We have a panel of 6 people, 6 very inspirational people, and we're going to introduce them now. So firstly, on our panel is Marta Clark. And I know Marta very well, and Marta is a peer support worker within the Irish Mental Health Services. And through her work, she has had the opportunity to become part of working groups that work towards service improvement in the areas of care planning, the use of restrictive practices, and the development of guidance around smoking and mental health. Marta has been involved in recovery education and the development of peer-led initiatives within the southeast of Ireland since 2015. Next on our panel is Maureen Lynch. And Maureen has served on the board of Galway Simon Community for 10 years and was appointed chair in 2016. Maureen recently retired from Wood PLC, an energy engineering service company where she was the global human resource programs manager. She has extensive experience in HR, having held senior HR management roles in HP, Compaq, and Digital in Galway and the United States. She is a member of Galway Local Mental Health Forum for the last 3 years, representing families and carers. She has a master's in counselling, a BA in psychology, and a HDIP in personal and executive coaching. Next on our panel is Virginia Moyles. And Virginia is a peer educator with the Galway Recovery College. She brings many years of experience in education, training, and personal development, as well as her own experiences of mental health challenges and recovery, to the provision of transformative learning in recovery in mental health. She spent several years facilitating groups with Aware, a founding member of CUSON, Galway's community peer-led peer support group. Next on our panel today is Kieran Moran. And Kieran is a 56-year-old gentleman with lived experience of mental health challenges. He also supports people with their own mental health challenges and is a member of the Mental Health Fora in Mayo. Next on our panel is Oliver Murna. And Oliver is an area director of nursing for the Dublin South Central Mental Health Services, with responsibility for older adult and CAMHS inpatient and community services. He is a registered psychiatric and general nurse and holds a Master's of Arts in Management and Healthcare. His professional background is in acute and community mental health nursing, with extensive experience in challenging and busy environments. He has worked in a wide variety of national and international settings, and that experience has shaped his approach to fostering high standards of care with the person at the center of everything the service does. Finally on our panel, and not least, is Charles Searson. And Charles is a father of 4 grown-up children, a self-confessed bon vivant, and is a boisterous advocate for broader inclusion. He recently achieved a master's degree in business and has been involved in a number of business ventures ranging from direct marketing to wine distribution. Following a sudden and intense transition to supporterhood about 7 years ago, Charles became involved with WRAP, which stands for Wellness Recovery Action Planning, and later became one of the first peer supporters with the Detect services in Blackrock. Charles is currently the area lead for engagement, responsible for Community Healthcare East. He regularly guest lectures in UCD and Trinity College in Dublin. So they are our 6 main panel speakers for today. And in a moment, I will give them the opportunity to introduce themselves, but also discuss what are their roles and how does lived experience shape their roles. So if I could start off with Martha Clark, if you could inform us on what is your role and how does your lived experience inform that role?
Yeah, so that's a big question, really. Yeah, so my role is a peer support worker. So primarily, I would be employed to deal one-on-one with people in a supportive way, to help facilitate recovery for them, and to share, I suppose, some of my own knowledge, because I've been lucky enough to have, an experience of recovery myself. So that would be kind of the core of what I would be employed to do. The other parts that I would find myself getting involved in would be, say, service improvement initiatives, even on a local or regional level. I feel lucky to be invited to more groups than I can even actually do, because I have to remind myself what my priority is, and that would be the supportive role. But it is great that there is such a welcome for lived experience starting to build in the services, and I would see myself as having a lot to contribute to those, because I can see now the way the service works from the inside, whereas before I would have had a kind of an outside view of it, even when I was using services myself. So I can see kind of both sides of the coin in many ways now, and that's a very important reflective position to be in. So yeah, my lived experience would inform my role in so many ways, in terms of say what I want to say to somebody. I would always be quite reflective in my practice. How would I feel if this was suggested to me, or this was said to me? And even using lived experience is a skill in itself. So I would have seen my ability to use my lived experience develop across the time I've been employed since 2017. That it's not, it's not always relevant in terms of what you share. It's more about the values that you hold and how you recognize and acknowledge what somebody else is going through. So yeah, I would say that my lived experience is intrinsic to what I do, but it does take more than lived experience to do what I do. And I might come back to that later, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Marta, for that insight into the world of peer support working and how it is really, really important and really, really a valuable role for people. And as you said, it's not just about sharing that lived experience, it's about having those core values in you as well. So that's really, really important. Thank you, Marta. Just before I move on to the next panel member, this will be an interactive session, so please send in any questions you may have on the chat box to us. We will try and endeavour to actually get through to all of the questions that you've asked there today. If we haven't done so, we will work on answering those questions in the next few days. But please keep sending in your questions to the panel members and we will ask them in due course. The next panel member I would like to get their opinion of is Maureen Lynch. So Maureen, if you can give us a little bit about what your role is and how lived experience informs your role. You're on mute there, Maureen.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, I'm a family member, a carer of my son, who has been experiencing mental health challenges for the last 10 years. And I think I sort of stumbled into this movement, if you will, by trying to figure out what is out there for people to support them in their recovery. And you know, it's not easy to navigate those services that are out there when you're not part of them and don't work for the HSE or really understand how things work. So I would have done, I suppose, a lot of research myself into trying to figure out what services we could offer to my son and to me and my husband and my other children in terms of support for us as family members throughout the ups and downs that we've been through. So I don't know how exactly, but I stumbled upon the Galway Local Forum and went along to a meeting and discovered, I suppose, the engagement aspect of this whole thing. And, you know, it was interesting. I just went out of curiosity, I suppose. And then I learned that my opinion really did matter. And that was great because I was the only one there representing family members and still am, to the best of my knowledge, on that forum. So that's a voice that often doesn't know how to engage. I would have been an example of that for the last 10 years. I didn't, well, I guess maybe this focus hasn't been there for 10 years, but as you're saying, 2018. But anyway, I'm delighted that there is a focus now on recovery because that's really what it's all about. I mean, that's what I want for my son and my family, is to be happy, to have a normal life, to, you know, have a better life. So I'm happy that I stumbled into this whole thing, and, you know, it's led to my becoming involved now in a working group on the recovery modules, which has been very interesting. We've just started out on our journey to make recommendations in that regard. And it will be co-produced with lived experience people and carers like myself. So I think it's a terrific opportunity to get involved for anyone out there who might not know how to. I would encourage perhaps more outreach or something to get this message out. I mean, this panel today is a very good step in that direction, and I'm happy to be involved.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Thank you so much, Maureen, for that great insight into what it's like for a family member in the mental health services and how the local forums, in your opinion, has helped you to have that voice within services. So next on our panel to introduce themselves and to discuss about their role and how lived experience shapes that role is Virginia Moyles.
Hi, Michael. Thank you. Well, I'm Virginia Moyles. I'm the peer educator with Galway Recovery College, and my role is coordinating the work of the college in terms of co-production and co-facilitation of all of the recovery education programs that we offer our students. Can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, we can, Virginia. Keep going.
Right. So I bring my own lived experience of a diagnosis of clinical depression and recovery to my work through our co-production. So trying to ensure that we reflect the lived experience of as many people as possible with mental health difficulties. And that's an integral part of the 3 perspectives. So we also co-produce with, of course, family members and people providing services. So bringing that lived experience, I think, offers hope to our students and offers the opportunity to find their own path towards recovery. I think it hopefully enables people to empower themselves to seek out their own path, because everybody's path is different. And they get the opportunity to hear about different experiences, different pathways to recovery, and get support in plotting their own path, hopefully. Working with other people, we do a lot. Of course, we're working on the 3 perspectives all the time. So we're always working with family members and service providers, both in the college and on working groups to expand and enhance recovery education, and on changes to service provision as well. And I think the benefits of involving our lived experience is that, well, our students recognise that all 3 perspectives are integral to everything we do. And we get very positive feedback from them on their learning, both whether they are people with lived experience of their own mental health difficulties, their family members, or service providers. Everybody's does seem to be learning a lot from what we're doing. I think that's all I want to say, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Virginia. And it's really interesting to hear how lived experience really shapes how the Recovery College, the ethos of the Recovery College, and that of co-production as well, and how, the lived experience is as valuable as the learned knowledge as well, which is really, really important. Thank you so much, Virginia. Next, to introduce themselves and to discuss a little bit about their role and how their lived experience shapes their role is Kieran Moore.
Good morning, all. My name is Kieran Moran. I'm a 56-year-old. I'm a service user between the UK and Ireland. I'm involved with the WARE since 2013. I have raised funds of over 100,000 with a couple of other people in the last 5 years. Through that, I heard about the Recovery College, and I joined that in 2015. The Recovery College has done an awful lot for me. I was asked to join the engagement forum, or the open forum, in 2018 when it started in Castlebar. Our aim is working with the HSE to improve services and with others people to share our opinions and improve services and educate each other really on from staff down to service users like myself, that we can tell them what we witness in the unit, and that they can they can either act on it or advise us what to do. Because really it's all about trying to build trust in each other and to help people relax when they're in there, to trust others, to recover, and above all really is the services after they leave the unit, and you know that they're followed up by staff to be helped to survive and not to feel lost when they go out on their own after, because oftentimes that's where the problems are. And that's really the what we aim to do on the open forum, is just talk with each other and try and sort things out. And as I say, one thing we looked into was the pajamas thing in the unit, where they had to wear them, and visitors were going in and they were seeing that you were a patient, that you weren't just visiting someone else, because everyone was mixed together. And they've relaxed back on that now, and it's an option whether you wear it or not. We're also trying to look after, one of the biggest things really is to look after the after service after people leave it, and that they know exactly what they're doing and they know the support there for them. That's me really. If you have any questions, there's no problem, I'll try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kieran. And it's really interesting to hear how the forums and being involved in forums really fosters your lived experience, and how you know, your lived experience is actually making a difference. And that's those simple things like trying to get the pajamas, the way what you have to wear in the hospitals, trying to make it more so not pajamas wear, but the person, what the person wants to wear. And that's really, really interesting as well. Thank you so much, Kieran. Next on our panel discussion, just to introduce themselves, is Oliver Myrna, sorry.
Hi, can you hear me, Michael?
We can hear you, Oliver, thank you.
Nice. Thanks, Michael, and thanks to the other Michael as well for inviting me to be on this forum. I've really enjoyed the contribution so far, and I'm learning a lot actually. Lovely video. I suppose over the years I've practiced in a number of different areas, and I suppose over that time working as a nurse, I've experienced firsthand the growing change in our approach to delivering care. I think the growth of recovery practices, with that growth, I think we've realised that recovery is much more than treating illness, but also us as kind of service providers, we need to look through a different lens to ensure people are empowered and are making informed choices, and to determine their own destiny and their goals in life. I think that's challenging for mental health services, because I think we're very much built on our own systems and structures. But the only way to progress it, I suppose, is to understand what recovery-focused service, should or might look like. I've been asked, I suppose, to talk about lived experience and how it's utilised, if you like, in our service. I think there's been a number of drivers behind that, obviously, the national strategies such as sharing a vision, and the Mental Health Commission has obviously been long advocating for recovery-orientated services. The National Recovery Framework obviously highlights lived experience as one of its central tenets of recovery. I think that ability to self-determine one's own goals and take responsibility and to know what's important as a person. And I think for us as a service to understand that the expert experience of a service user and what they're able to bring to the table in terms of co-production and partnership, I think is really important. I suppose in our service over the last few years, our approach to developing recovery-focused services based on lived experience has gained momentum. As we know, all services have area leads in mental health engagement, and they've set up local forums which are starting to influence and shape our service strategy. I think Michael would have mentioned earlier about the Service Reform Fund, and I suppose our attempt to get our own house in order around that, because we didn't get it right at the start, and we're trying to get that right now. So we've set up a service improvement group, which is based on a partnership approach, which we've active members from service users, carers, service providers, area engagement lead, and also, I suppose, our community partners such as Threshold and Gateway and other services that work closely alongside us, like Eve Holdings. And I suppose this is a high-level oversight group that works to ensure recovery-focused services and communities with clear pathways to community living, employment, and recovery. And we try and oversee and monitor a number of working groups around that, and some of the achievements might be the individual placement and support workers, working with people to gain active employment, and looking at community living groups, which are, for us, is looking at our models of, individual housing options and moving away from our traditional landlord approach in the HSE, and trying to moving away from the high support residences as well, and trying to establish relationships, if you like, for service users and carers in the community. I think our recovery program is providing education to staff and service users through recovery facilitators, and we're in the process of employing peer support workers. And it's great to hear from Marta earlier there, and it gives me a great understanding of what we're missing out on, I suppose. I think from a service user point of view, the approach towards care planning, we have struggled with it, and I think it is starting to make slow gains now, to ensure that we hear the lived experience of people and that we're able to share it in our care plan with the person's own words, to setting a personal goals with a co-production approach. Finally, I just mentioned some of the benefits. I think certainly from bringing in the service improvement group, there has been better communication for our service, and I'm talking from a staff point of view, I suppose, from top down and bottom up. I think we've started a real and a meaningful conversation about the way the service is delivered, and we're starting to challenge, I suppose, the traditional systems and structures. And some clear examples, there are 2 people have been placed in full-time employment. We have a number of housing support workers now, and they're directly employed by folks working alongside people looking for individual support. So I think there's a number of really good examples there, and I think it's really, for us, it's trying to balance, I suppose, the good aspects of the biomedical model, along with understanding the centrality of the lived experience. And I'll just finish off and just leave you with a quote I heard recently, and I think it's very relevant to us all, and particularly us as a service. I think we have to stop being afraid of what can go wrong and start being excited about what can go right. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you so much, Oliver. And it's interesting to hear from the service provider's perspective how the lived experience and the lived experience of people, but also the roles that encompass lived experience, are really starting to infiltrate into the traditional settings, and how they're making a positive and lasting difference to the people that are using the services. It's interesting the way that you brought up about the care plan, and how that is a true representation of the lived experience of the person as well. So thank you for that, Oliver. Lastly but not leastly, I'd like to pass over to Charles Searson.
How you doing? Can you hear me, Michael?
I can hear you, Charles, yeah.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for having me. And say again.
You're freezing on us there, Charles. Sorry, now.
The words of wisdom we left from the previous panelists. Can I be heard?
Sorry, Charles, you're still freezing on us.
Something went wrong.
I'll stop my video and oh dear.
Try speaking there now, Charles. It looks like we have lost Charles. So until Charles come back, what we might do is just move on to some of the questions that you've raised in your...
Am I back?
Are you back, Charles?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you better now, yeah.
Not really.
We can, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, look, I'm really sorry that I'm I'm in a house with a whole bunch of people who are all trying to use the internet at the same time. So you can imagine what it's like. I'm kind of overwhelmed by the wisdom and the insight that we've heard so far. My role is as an area lead for engagement. So I'm responsible for Community Healthcare East, and that idea of co-facilitating the setup and the running of the forums. And trying to ensure that the forums are seen by the local management teams as an asset, and trying to ensure that the voice of people's experiences, which is expressed in those forums, is brought to the management team in a way that they can work with it. So trying to turn a person's story into an experience and a reflection that might be used for service improvement. And I suppose to ensure that the management team are in a place of being able to hear people's experiences of what's working, and to hear people's experiences of what might be improved in a way that they don't find it challenging to the great work that they're doing. And I suppose traditionally there has been a mistrust of people in the community of the mental health services and the people who provide them, and indeed a mistrust in the management teams of the idea that people would come to the table and start creating havoc. And I think that trust is starting to build, and it's lovely to see. And I think there's a whole bunch of really positive things that have happened alongside that, which is about people having found their voice, wanting to work a little further and get involved in other activities, the co-production of education, to get involved in the development of policies, to work on national panels to make sure that recovery initiatives nationally and at an area level are being implemented. And so most of the CHO areas, if not all, have recovery improvement and implementation groups, which came from the old ARI groups. And now, as Oliver was talking about, service improvement groups have sort of evolved from that, integrating with the funding from the Service Reform Fund and other initiatives that are happening. But I suppose what we're starting to see in the forums and in the development of policy, because our area is really interested in advancing policy, is that because of Sláintecare, and because there's a broader view of the integration of public mental health services with community and voluntary groups, and as Oliver was talking about, asking the HSE not to be involved in things that they shouldn't be involved in, for instance, like they shouldn't be landlords. I mean, that's kind of clear. Is to help, first of all, the service to reconfigure itself over time into something that's much more community-based and much more community-integrated. But the second thing, and this is what brought me, and I suppose you were talking about a little, what is my personal experience? It's about having a broader view of what mental health or mental ill health is. And from my personal perspective, as a family member, I can say that a mental health crisis in one person in the family is a mental health crisis for everybody in that family. And when I use the word family, I mean family of choice, that group of people who share a fridge, as somebody so beautifully put it to me. I think it's really essential that we start to look not just at the whole person for the whole of life, which is the Sláintecare approach, mental and physical health working together, and the whole of life from prenatal right through to end of life, but also to look at whole family or whole unit, because I think that's where this whole idea of supportership and needing support in terms of the recovery focus really becomes important. It's what resources and education do supporters and family members have in order to be able to properly help a person recover, and what recovery needs do those family members and supporters need for themselves. So I'm looking forward to that part of the discussion with the panel. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much, Charles, for that insight into the area lead's life, day in the life, so to speak, and how you're involved in so many different groups at management level and bringing the lived experience point of view to that management level area. So that's really, really interesting. So thank you, Charles. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask some of the panel's members some of the questions that you have raised within the chat box. Please feel free to add in more questions as we go along. We might not be able to make all these questions, might not be able to answer all these questions today, but there will be a meeting with the panel members after this where we will sit down and endeavor to answer all those questions that you've been asking. So please keep firing them in away. I might just switch things around a bit instead of going in order. So I would like to ask Maureen, what have you seen as the key issues for mental health recovery due to COVID and public restrictions, and how do you see them being overcome going forward?
Well, obviously the Zoom, approach to everything lately has some advantages, strangely, because, you think of, I don't know, people talking face to face obviously is always preferable, but when that's not possible, we do have alternatives. And sometimes it can actually help a shy person get involved in conversations, and the flexibility is there too. And from my work with the Simon community, it's very interesting because we made sure that in all our sheltered housing that we gave all the homes PCs and so on, and showed people how to use Zoom and what have you. And we actually saw an increase in accessing recovery education modules as a result. So the encouragement to participate in other ways has been working. So that's a good thing. Obviously, the isolation of people is not a good thing, because people with mental health challenges often feel isolated anyway. And that's certainly something that I can notice from my son, who's really quite lonely right now. So yeah, it's I think for a lot of people made it very difficult to cope with, but there are some positive tools that I think we need to encourage people to use.
Thank you so much, Maureen, and it's really interesting to get your insight in this, because I suppose it is a key question for a lot of people. What kind of restrictions, due to the restrictions of COVID, how's that affecting people, but also how is that affecting the mental health recovery movement as such? And what's really interesting to hear from yourself is that there is both pros and cons to it. And the pros is that you're reaching new people that you haven't reached before, but you're also, it's the flexibility. It's not everybody has to be in one place at one time. It's that flexibility that's there as well. But also the challenges, of course, being that of isolation, and that can obviously have negative effects on one's mental health as well. So that's really interesting. Thank you, Maureen. I'd like to ask Kieran, if that's okay, a question. And this is one of the questions that kind of keeps coming up, kept coming up while you were speaking, Kieran. And it's basically someone asking, I suppose, how do you let people know about what recovery options are available? Are you there, Kieran? Kieran, I'll come back to you if that's okay. But I would now like to ask Martha a question. And Martha, there was an awful lot of discussion whilst you were speaking there today as well. Sorry, Martha, Kieran is coming in through audio there. So Kieran, we still can't hear you there, but still can't hear you, Kieran. Sorry now. Now go ahead.
how far have I to go back? Yeah, I start again. Well, we really need to have something left with doctors, that a list with doctors of the services that's available. They're in all different spots in the towns and all different offices, and people do not know where to go. And I know it's only through going through different meetings and things like that that you find out about something else. But you shouldn't be left in that situation because people need to know from day one. People think the only cure there is medication. But in fact, probably 10% of it is medication. The rest should be through different talk therapies and meeting the right person at the right time and being fit to get CBT when it's due to you and different things like that. That's been my opinion on it.
Thank you, Kieran, and it's really interesting to hear from your point of view about what we as a service can do to actually make sure that people that have lived experience of mental health challenges, their family members, their carers, have information to all recovery resources, and that fact as well that the acknowledgement even from a service user's point of view, and I can relate to this acknowledgement as well, that medication, although it is part of the treatment process and it has a very valid role in recovery, that it only has a certain amount of a role in recovery, and that the rest of it is up to yourself and learning new techniques for yourself. So thanks, Kieran, for that. So I might just pass over to Marta Clark, if that's okay. And Marta, as I was saying earlier, there was a lot of questions coming in when you were speaking. And I suppose one of the questions that's being asked is hitting around that aspect about, that lived experience and that sharing aspect of things. And the question that I'd like to ask you is, what is your key learning discerning that your lived experience is not just about sharing?
Yeah, I was really taken with that question myself. I thought it was really nuanced, and there are a few different sides to it. So say, in a possibly tautological sense, when you use your lived experience and reflect on your own experience, you might think to yourself, how would I feel if somebody jumped in now and used their lived experience? So say, for example, there would have been times on my journey when my friends might have rushed in with, oh, I felt that before, I felt like that before. And instead of me feeling connected to them, I might have actually felt a little disconnected because I was thinking, no, my experience is not just like yours. I don't want to be diminished by that. And that is a really key skill to know when to share and when not to share, because if the sharing, say, is going to make somebody feel upset or it's not going to empower them or inspire them in any way, I don't believe there is a need to share. I think I would have felt pressure to share more about my lived experience when I started out, but now I feel a lot more comfortable in it. I have set my own kind of boundaries around it, that of course I will stand in my own truth and I will say what I think when the time is right, but I will never diminish somebody else's lived experience or act like mine is more important than theirs. Because really I see my role as bringing out their lived experience so they can stand in their own truth and say, this is what I have learned about myself. This is what I have learned works for me. And that will be individual to them. So yeah, I think, does that cover that question?
I think it does, Marta. And the key takeaways that I'm taking from that, if that's okay, is it's your lived experience is important when you're working with people who has lived experience, but it's that thing of being mindful of what do I need to share in order to create this relationship, and it kind of links back to my own studies in a way, because it's kind of like, okay, so do I share my whole narrative when I'm connecting with someone, or do I just share the bits that are relevant to this particular case, if that makes sense? But also you're trying to think as well, if I share a bit of my narrative, is this going to have a negative impact on that person? Because is this going to show, oh, I had a worse experience than you and I got through it, kind of thing? And kind of having that really bad, I suppose it would be a really bad kind of notion that think that, oh, you're boosting yourself up by saying, oh, I was worse off and I'm better now and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of really that balancing act between really sharing what is necessary to share, that would allow for that relationship to occur, and not sharing too much to cause a negative aspect to that relationship. So that's really, really interesting.
You could relate it back to, I think Sinead Reynolds spoke brilliantly about kind of power dynamics. And if I'm sharing my own story, it's one, because I feel safe with the person, that I feel that we're on the same level, that we're in an environment where we can both feel safe and share in a safe way. And two, that it's creating that mutuality, that, you know, that recognition that we've both had something similar go on in our lives, and that might help form the foundation of the relationship. But it won't necessarily define the relationship, because we could have a lot of differences as well. But yeah, just that, trying to even the playing field a little bit, and to be conscious of the power dynamics that can happen when someone is referred to you, you know, and they mightn't know exactly what they're going to get out of this, and they want to keep an open mind, but there might be a bit of ambivalence there, and that's perfectly natural as well. So yeah, it's a brilliant question. Thanks for asking it.
No problem, and thank you to the person that asked it as well, because it really is a very, very important part of peer support, trying to make that balancing act and trying to make sure that you're sharing just enough to allow that relationship to form that is really, really positive and mutual in nature. So thank you, Martha. I'd like to pass over to Charles now, Charles Searson. And there's a question that's after coming in that I think is really interesting as well. And I'm just wondering, do you think it's timely that a national directory of mental health engagement local forums with a profile of their work and experiences be produced?
Couldn't agree more. And that's something we should be doing. I think, you know, we've been walking as a group of leads working in engagement. We've been walking on new ground and building the path by throwing bricks in front of us. Now's the time, I think, to start to become a little bit more nationally organized in terms of communications, in terms of directories, whatever. And, you know, we all know that directories go out of date as soon as you publish them. So we are probably looking at online resources, really. But I think it's one of the essential functions of any local forum is to be a point of welcome and information to people in the community, whether they're supporters, family members, or even staff wanting to reach out into the community and voluntary sector to find other resources outside of what's available in public mental health services. So from everybody's point of view, I suppose that shared lived experience, that co-produced directory would be really, really useful. But it's not just, in my view, about directories. I think forums have an essential part to play in the story that goes behind the directory. Because we've all seen, you know, lists, but what do they mean? And if somebody has got something out, for instance, out of their local grow group, that is absolutely fantastic. They could also have got something out of a different group like Recovery Inc. or, you know, there's so many, so they're going out of my head. But it would be lovely, and I think it's essential that somebody can say, well, I tried that and it was like this, and this worked for me. And it's not that it might work for anybody else. It's you know, because it's all about a person's individual choice and what works for them. But I do think personal recommendations and personal feedback add to the richness and effectiveness of any directory. So I think it's a mixture of online resources and also the fact that the forum is there and people should be able to link in and find out more and feel happy, not just to be an active member of the forum in terms of working with the local management team, which was what it was set up for, but also to drop in on forums and say, look, I have a couple of questions, would you guys mind answering? And, you know, I'd love to know. Because I think there's that sense of community, community of interest, which can be really well served in the forum environment.
you so much. Thank you so much, Charles. And it is really interesting to hear about this whole idea of, you know, local forums having a directory, but also, you know, that we need to go beyond that now, and we need to make something that is more, you know, up to date and really, really powerful for people to come in, and really something that will invite more people to come into the forums as well. So thank you, Charles. So I would just like to ask a question to Oliver, if that's okay. So Oliver, I'm just wondering if you can tell me, do you think that lived experience is valued in your area?
Michael?
Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Hi, Michael. Yeah, okay. That's a very good question, actually. I say a hesitant yes, and probably no as well. So I'm sitting on the fence here. I think some of the experiences and interactions, I suppose, I've been involved in recent years would certainly have a powerful impact on my thinking. And I'm thinking of, I suppose, you know, having the area lead for mental health engagement, the impact of local forums. I think Michael mentioned earlier about, you know, the likes of Liam Hennessy, people like that, people I really learned from, people I worked with on the, you know, co-produced OLS programs. I remember hearing a peer worker down in Kilkenny one time, or sorry, in Dublin one time. He was from Kilkenny, and it was so inspirational, a bit like Martha there. Like, you really get such an insight, and it changes how you think, and it opens up your mind to, okay, there is a different way of doing things here. I'm looking at all the good stuff we're doing with, you know, the Service Improvement Group through the Service Reform Fund. But I think it also comes with a caveat, I suppose, that, like, you know, as service providers, there's still, we're caught up in structures and tightened boundaries, if you like, and we're finding it hard to fully embrace the lived experience. I'm not sure why that. I know some ways why it is. It's obviously culture, and you can have all the strategies in the world, but we know culture eats strategy for breakfast in the morning, so we know that. But I think we probably need a little bit more education and training ourselves to avoid this token involvement, you know. And I think as well, and I'm only talking for our area, and I know probably our mental health engagement lead would say the same, that in some of our areas we're finding it difficult to attract people with lived experience into the force, and that's something I think is really important and we need to really work on, you know.
Thank you, Oliver, and it's really interesting to hear as well that you know, and the honesty in regards to, you know, it's yes and no whether the lived experience is fully valued in your area, and really it's kind of trying to figure out that balancing act between, is lived experience being there because it's tokenistic, just to say that we have it, or are we actually using it to the best of our ability? And you've given us some really good examples of how we can use that to the best of our ability, through peer support, through local forums, through area leads, all these kind of things. But it's interesting from your point of view, you can see that, yeah, we've made a great start, but we have a lot more work to do. And that's really, really interesting as well. And that's probably one of the roles of our office here in the National Office of Mental Health Engagement and Recovery. I'm just conscious of time. We have about 5 minutes left in our panel discussion. Please keep sending in the questions. We probably won't get to all of your questions there today, but we will endeavor to answer them in due course. My final question for today goes to Virginia. So Virginia, I'm just wondering, what difference does it make to students in your recovery college when a facilitator has lived experience of their own mental health challenges?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, thanks.
I think it makes it easier for people to expect to be really heard and understood. I think it also offers hope in terms of when people hear other stories of recovery. It inspires them to think about what they can do for their own recovery. I think it also encourages family members and people providing services to review their expectations, understanding of what someone with mental health difficulties can do and how they can recover. So I think it can have an effect for everybody. It can just offer that hope and that role model in a sense, I suppose.
Thank you, Virginia. And it's really what I'm gathering from you is that the lived experience is so valuable to someone when they're actually sitting in a recovery educational program or workshop and hearing that this person has actually gone through the same thing. And it really helps not just the service user or the family member in the room, but it helps everybody in the room to get that deeper understanding. And really it has that sense of hope as well, that okay, this guy has had lived experience, or this girl has had lived experience of the same things that I have, and they're able to sit up in a group and actually say and talk about this particular topic. That gives me great hope that maybe one day I'll be able to do the same. So that's really interesting to hear as well, Virginia. My final question is for all panel members, and it's one that's really an interesting question. So basically, people are asking, what in your opinion has been the most significant factors that service users should or need to, or service users, family members should or need to consider when becoming involved?
I think Martha put it very well about learning how to express your lived experience in a way that's inspirational to others, but that doesn't deplete yourself. And I you know, from my own experience and co-facilitating forums, I think that's, you know, that's a balance that isn't automatically achieved. And I think you know, that from that point of view, I think it's how supportive a forum is, how supportive our society is, at allowing people perhaps go a little bit too far and just letting them at it, letting them express that energy, tell that story, disclose perhaps, over disclose, and then to kind of model a kind of a more balanced, nuanced approach that's really healthy. But also to recognize that sometimes people just need to let off because they haven't spoken about so many things that are deeply personal to them. And okay, it may sometimes the space may be inappropriate, but you know, that's healthy too, that people have a space to speak, and you know, it's a privilege to hear people speak.
Thank you, Charles. And it's really kind of lays down the thing as well, that it's to give, people need to think about what they're sharing and whether they are comfortable in sharing what they're sharing. And that's really important as well, because if you overshare, you know, you can feel really bad inside. But also if you undershare, you feel the same way as well. So it's great to have that, and even using the forums as an opportunity to share your lived experience as well, relating to a given topic is really, really valuable to know that resource is there for people. I'm just conscious of time, so unfortunately we have come to the end of our panel discussion. We have loads upon loads of questions that you've all sent in over the day. Apologies that we could not meet all these questions, but we will endeavour to do so in due course. We will hopefully plan a meeting with the panel members so that we can get those questions answered and sent out to you as quickly as possible. I'd like to thank you all for all those questions that you've asked today. They're all extremely valid, and apologies that we could not get to them all. I'd also like to thank our panel members, Virginia Moyles, Martha Clark, Charles Searson, Kieran Moran, Maureen Lynch, and Oliver Myrna, for taking the time out today to actually support us in this panel discussion. And I'd also now like to pass you over to Catherine O'Grady and Debbie Murphy, who will close the day for us. Thank you.
Hi, can everyone hear me there? Okay.
Yes.
I'd just like to say thank you to the panel members following on from that. Just that it was inspiring, I suppose, to hear all of that, because sometimes when you're doing this work over years, you forget, you know, how important and sometimes how slow this work can be, and it can be frustrating. And it's when people get together to talk about it, it certainly energizes you, and I'm sure other people feel the same about that. I'm Catherine, and I'm one of the team members as well, and I'm really pointing you to the our evaluation piece around this, and why it's important as well for us is to hear what you'd like in coming webinars. We're hoping to do one in December. So it's great to get the feedback on what you'd like to see more of, less of, or how you found this experience today. So thank you to everyone. And I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Debbie Murphy. And I should also just tell you that the resources, there's a number of resources online, and that's through the Mental Health Engagement website, but we will also be sending out a list of resources that you can find online as well. So over to my colleague, Debbie.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
No? Yeah. My name's Debbie. I'm the administrative assistant with the team. I just want to thank you all for attending this morning. I hope you really enjoyed it as much as I did. I want to thank Sinead Reynolds and our own team here ourselves as well. And a huge thank you to the panel members.
I think Debbie just lost her connection there for a moment. Can you all hear? Just to say thank you again on behalf of the team. Debbie was just about to say that, and we hope you all enjoyed this morning's session. And as we said in the chat function, we will be answering all of the questions that were posed this morning that we didn't get to. We'll do that via video, and we'll share the video with you. You'll also get your email in the next short while with your resources and the evaluation. So thank you again, and we hope to see you all soon.